So I'm going to talk about the seigneurial system. And the areas I'm going to talk about are the St. Lawrence River and everybody wanting water access, the king appointing the seigneurs and the Abbe Tom, and then general life in the beginning of New France. So, once the king is in charge, there needs to be some more organization. You have all these people coming to the new colony in New France, and there needed to be some organization about where they were going to set up, where they were going to start their homes, where they were going to start their farms, and so they organized a system. In order to have a farm, you had to have water, and they were all along the St. Lawrence River. Everybody wanted a piece of the water access because they needed to be able to water their fields. But instead of taking up a large section of the water, they decided to organize it in the seigneurial system, where everyone would get a small section of the water, but their farm would then go out in a straight line from the water. So instead of having the farm that runs right along the river, you get a small section on the water, and then your piece of land goes up. Okay. So to keep this organization and make sure this structure stays, the king appoints the seigneurs, and he gives them a section of land. So a seigneur would be given this section of land. Okay. And then he would have to do some things with that land. The first would be to divide it up. And he would divide it up into sections. And then he would give those sections to the Abbe Tom, where they can then farm on it. He was responsible for building a house and a mill on his section of land. And to contribute to the building of a church in the area. And to report back to the intendant. The intendant was a member of the Sovereign Council, and he was in charge of the day-to-day goings. So the seigneur would report back any of the Abbe Tom whose farms were doing well or were not doing well, anyone who wasn't going to church, anyone who maybe had a child that was of marrying age but wasn't getting married, anyone who wasn't paying their dues. So again, the seigneurs were acting almost like spies, where they were reporting back to the intendant, who would then report back to the governor general, who would then report back to the king. So everyone would know what they were doing, and people would always feel like they were being watched. Now the Abbe Tom. So the Abbe Tom would come and they would go to a seigneur and they would ask for a piece of land. And they would be given a section of land in the seigneur's larger section. And they also had some responsibilities. One, they had to build a house and farm the land. They also had to use the mill, and they had to pay the miller, and they also had to pay dues to the seigneur. So it was almost like paying rent. There was not a lot of excess income once they'd paid the seigneur and paid to use the mill. And then they had to do unpaid labor for the seigneur, which usually involved building that church and maintaining the seigneur's property and the mill. Now, something that was different in New France than it was in France was that women could actually own property in New France. A woman could be a seigneur and have control over a larger section of land. Very few women did it, but it was allowed. Life in New France. So, like that activity we did in class, life in New France was hard. It was very rural. You're starting from the beginning. Homes were, basics. You had to get your bare necessities first, and you were pretty isolated. In Europe, there were a lot of countries nearby where you could go and seek out resources and things that you need. In New France, the nearest country that they knew of was across an ocean. So it was really a new beginning. They were responsible for growing their own food, which they learned the skills to do that from the Aboriginals. But they needed to grow the food for themselves first, and then hopefully be able to make more of a crop to then start to make money. Their clothing, they made. And they made it from animal hides. They had linen, hemp, and wool. They wore moccasins or clogs, and the women wore bonnets, and the men wore toques. Their homes would have a stone foundation, mostly because that's what was on their land. This is brand new land, full of trees, full of rocks, uneven, and they had to build with what they had. So they would collect the rocks and make that foundation for their home. Then they could cut down the trees, mill the trees, and sometimes the structure of the house would be made out of wood, or it could also be made out of stone. There were no glass windows. They had parchment windows that was made out of sheepskin. And the homes would often be one giant room, and there would be an attic where they would sleep. So it would be like an area above. There would be a fire pit in the middle of the room, or a fireplace, and that's what gave them heat. It would help them to cook their food, and it was also their source of light. So life was very rural. It was very hard. A lot of people died. There was a lot of sickness, and there wasn't anything you could do if you did get sick. So it was a difficult way to live.